journée historique pour le Canada parce que nous avons fait le lancement de la déclaration contre la détention arbitraire dans les relations entre États. Et nous avons non seulement fait la déclaration aujourd'hui, mais le Canada, qui a commencé cette initiative, a été rejoint par 57 autres pays et un bon nombre d'eux ont fait des déclarations durant un événement qui a duré à peu près 2 heures et demie. Today is an historic day for Canada because it was Canada's initiative to launch the declaration against the arbitrary detention of citizens in state-to-state relations. And it was important because today was the official launch of that declaration. But as well, we had the pleasure of being joined by 57 other countries with Canada. And many of the countries actually made powerful testimonials in favor of stopping the practice of arbitrary detention, which is illegal and immoral. So a very important day for Canada launching this initiative. I'd be very pleased to take any questions.
Thank you. Merci. Please press star 1 at this time if you have a question. Veuillez s'il vous plaît appuyer sur étoile 1 maintenant pour poser une question. And we have a first question from David Aiken from Global News. Please go ahead. La parole est à vous.
Oh, thank you very much, and hope, of course, you can hear me. Thank you, Minister, for taking our questions. I guess the first question I have, I know that obviously China was not mentioned specifically in terms of today's announcement or the initiative. The declaration was mentioned specifically, but it seems that China has got the hint because their media mouthpiece, the Global Times, has run an article in which they describe this declaration as, and I'm quoting now, an aggressive and ill-considered attack designed to provoke China. And I wonder what your response might be to that.
Well, let me tell you what this declaration is. It is a statement by 58 countries that the practice of arbitrary detention is totally unacceptable. It goes against human rights, and it is immoral, and it has to stop. We did not identify any countries today when we made that declaration. Some of these speakers did identify individual countries, but it is specifically against the practice of arbitrary detention, something that should not have any role to play in state-to-state relations. Even if countries have differences of opinion, they should never resort to arbitrary detention, because what that means effectively is that the citizens of a particular country may not want to go to another country either to visit or to work or to live there because of their fear of arbitrary detention.
Thank you. And I'll just to follow up with a bit of a double-barreled one. Just on the number of countries, Ambassador Ray tweeted out this morning that we're now at 59 countries. So I just wondered if it is 59 or 58. And then just the second part of this double-barrel bit is whether or not you think this declaration may be useful for Canada as it continues to convince China to release the two Michaels. Can I get you to speak about how this may fit into Canada's continuing campaign to get the two Michaels out of jail in China?
Well, the number of countries at the moment is changing. It is, as far as I was told just before this conference, it's at 58 plus the European Union as a separate entity. We hope that that number is going to increase with time because a number of countries have told us that they're examining the declaration and they may join us later on. Of course, that is our hope. What we hope this declaration will do is make countries who do use arbitrary detention rethink that as a tool, of course, of diplomacy and reconsider that use because it really has no place in the world today. Again, as I've said, it goes against human rights. And so what we're doing with this initial declaration is trying to put pressure on countries that do it and to tell them that this is totally unacceptable and that there are eventually going to be consequences to countries that ignore that. We've just started with the declaration. We've got more things to do in the weeks and the months to come, but we want to build that momentum in the same ways we did when Canada initiated the anti-personnel mines initiative many years ago.
Thank you. The next question, la prochaine question est de David Thurton from CBC News. Please go ahead. La parole est à vous.
Hi, yes. Minister Garneau, you just said that there could be eventually consequences. So what's on the table?
Well, at the moment, it's a declaration, but what we want to do is to, and I said it this morning in my closing remarks, we may go to international bodies like the United Nations, the G7 and others, and to continue to send that message. And we will see, as happened with the anti-personnel mines, it eventually ended up as a treaty in 1997. What we want to do at the moment is this initial declaration to show that a fairly impressive number of countries, 58 as I mentioned so far, all feel very, very strongly about the fact that this form of coercive diplomacy by doing arbitrary detentions has no place in today's world. And so at the moment, what we're trying to do is to apply pressure to countries that do it, and eventually we'll explore what else can be done as we move forward.
Is boycotting the Olympics off the table or on the table?
As we have stated, our government has stated, the decision about the Olympics is a decision that is made by the Canadian Olympic Committee. And with respect to where it might be held, that's the International Olympic Organization. We feel that those are the appropriate bodies to make that decision.
Thank you. Merci. The next question, la prochaine question est de Mackenzie Gray from CTV. Please go ahead. La parole est à vous.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for taking our questions today. This obviously isn't the first time that the Canadian government's got our allies to call out on behalf of the Michaels. The U.S. has done that both under the Trump administration and with Joe Biden. The EU has done that previously too. What with this new declaration is actually going to change? Because if you're not calling out China in this, I don't think anything's actually going to move the needle here, is it?
Well, you know, it's one of those things where we will see. And I will say that Canada has long stated its objections, strong objections to arbitrary detention. And we feel that by taking this multilateral approach, because this is certainly an example of a multilateral approach, and I give credit to my predecessor for initiating this idea, we believe that we have a better chance of exerting pressure on those countries that do practice arbitrary detention. So as time goes on and as we build momentum for this initiative, and hopefully many more countries, we may find that there is sufficient momentum that countries begin to reconsider that practice. That is certainly something that we feel is very important in today's globalized operations that occur, whether it's with respect to trade or security or intergovernment relations between different countries. We think that it's important to make sure that the whole idea of using arbitrary detention is just set aside because it's totally unacceptable.
In the Globe and Mail today, Minister, they're reporting that NSERC has given Huawei $4.8 million, more than $4.8 million. Why is a federal government agency giving money to Huawei, considering the fact that clearly the two Michaels are being detained because of Montreal?
So what I would say to that is that the NSERC, which is the National Science and Engineering Research Council, is an independent body whose mandate is to fund promising research in the areas of science and engineering. And that sometimes is co-funding with not only universities, but also the private sector. Having said that, we do have a process that is ongoing at the moment to sensitize academics and bodies like the NSERC, granting councils, of the importance of making sure that Canadian intellectual property is protected. And that's an ongoing initiative that we've started, and we will continue to do that. But again, the NSERC is an independent body, but we are at the moment working with them so that they understand that there can be implications with respect to intellectual property.
Thank you. Merci. The next question. La prochaine question est de Mike Blanchfield from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. La parole est à vous.
Yeah, hi, Minister. Thanks for taking our questions. Are you concerned that there will be blowback for the two Michaels? I know you're trying to de-link this from them a little bit and make this a broader initiative, but there is a real consideration there, and we see the initial reaction out of China today. And this was no secret that you were doing this to them. I mean, you were going around the world asking for support. So, what can you say to that specifically, and what's your message to China about that?
Sometimes, Mike, it's important for the countries of the world to make important statements, in this case, about the practice of arbitrary detention. Canada initiated this. We felt it was extremely important, not only for our own country, but also for all of the countries of the world that have concerns that their citizens could arbitrarily be detained when they go to certain other countries that practice arbitrary detention. So this is a very big initiative on the global scale to try to bring an end to a totally illegal and immoral practice. And sometimes it's important for a country like Canada to stand up and to seek multilateral support, and that's what we've done today.
Mike, a follow-up?
What bodies are you going to next to sort of gain support? You talked about the UN and maybe G7. And what about maybe moving to a more coercive approach with sanctions and travel bans and whatnot? How far away are you on that?
Well, we're delighted that we're now 58 countries and that other countries are looking at the declaration. We will work with those countries, and it will be essentially an effort to come together and agree on how best to move to the next step. And so the consultations are just going to be beginning now that we've all agreed on the declaration. We will now be working together as to next steps. I gave a hint this morning that we would possibly engage certain international bodies, but that's just one of the possibilities. One of the things we will do for sure is to publicize this as much as possible in order to get an even greater number of countries to join. And so the future at the moment is being shaped, but we want to do it together, starting with the group that joined for today's declaration.
Thank you. Merci. The next question. La prochaine question est de Nathan Vanderclip from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. La parole est à vous.
Yes, hello. Arbitrary detention is very difficult to define. Are you at all worried that a country like China could take a declaration like this and use it to criticize Canada for the detention of someone like Meng Wanzhou?
So let me be very specific about what today's declaration was about. It was about arbitrary detention in the context of state-to-state relations. In other words, one country to press its own advantage and use the bargaining chip of hostages that are arbitrarily detained decides that it will arbitrarily detain because this may give it leverage in its relationship with another country. Let me be clear that we want to engage other countries, and we will engage other countries, and we will sometimes have disagreements with them. That's totally natural. But our aim is to, with the countries of the world, in some cases cooperate, in some cases compete, in some cases coexist, and in some cases challenge. And that is what our approach is in dealing with all the different countries of the world. But nowhere in there is it acceptable for any country to arbitrarily detain citizens of another country who may be over there visiting, living, working, simply because they want to use it as a tool of diplomatic coercion.
And as a follow-up, in terms of perhaps at some point using this as a way to inspire international action, I mean, Canada as a country has been quite reticent, quite reluctant to take harder measures against China in the course of this whole series of actions between Meng Wanzhou and the two Michaels. I mean, Canada has not brought any sort of trade measures against China. Canada has not brought any Magnitsky-style sanctions against China. You just mentioned on the Olympics that there's clearly no federal government plan to boycott the Olympics. I mean, if Canada itself is not willing to take real actions on these sorts of things, why would any other country in a situation like this be willing to take action in support of Canadians who are arbitrarily detained abroad?
There are many countries that joined us today who have citizens who are arbitrarily being detained in other countries. And that is why they joined us. And there are other countries that joined us because they're concerned that the same thing could happen to them in their state-to-state relations with other countries. So the 58 countries that came out with the declaration today are serious enough about it that they were ready to launch this declaration. That should tell you how serious this is and how committed these countries are to making an initial declaration and seeing what will happen in the weeks and months to come as we build momentum. Again, let me bring back the example of the anti-personnel mines, which is an initiative that was started by Canada, by Lloyd Axworthy, in fact, quite some time ago. And initially, to build up that support, Canada had to go and sell that to other countries to make them realize how the devastating effects of cluster bombs 20 years later on farmers out in their fields plowing had to be addressed, and how this kind of tool of war was totally unacceptable. And by 1997, we had a treaty. So momentum can be built on things that countries fundamentally think is wrong. And this is another example with arbitrary detention.
Thank you. Merci. There are no further questions registered. I'd like to turn the meeting back over to you, Minister.
Thank you very much for your questions, and we'll see how things develop in the coming months. Thank you.